Yo, what is cracking? What's popping? What's shaking everybody? We're starting off a little late, but we're here. We're ending the year off right with a 2022 wrap up, and yeah, we're here. We made it. We don't have to say who was late. I'll just, you know what? I was late. You know what I'm saying? I'll take it.
See, I feel like that's you being like, it's actually Grace's fault.
Nope, I
When
wasn't gonna
I'm
say
just
that.
so noble, it's me.
It's all good. How you doing though?
I'm good. It was just, yeah, I think like I told you, where the traffic basically stopped. I'm literally what would be normally 5 minutes away from my home, and it was like an hour.
Oh, geez,
So,
Louise.
oh yeah, it was like a really bad accident. Like the paramedics couldn't even get through. But we made it today. I'm really happy. We're all set. We're wrapping up the year. Right? Marvel DC talk of like just kind of wrapping up um our feelings, our thoughts, and all the projects that came out.
Sure. And I
I
do want
yeah,
to bring up because I just saw a post from DC Comics in terms of they actually did like a wrap up as far as what they did this year. So they're going to get like an honorable mention throughout the podcast. But like initially, these were shows and movies that we never talked about, but I will kind of run through that list a little later.
that sounds perfect. Yeah, that sounds great.
Okay. So let's rewind it a little bit just because say this year we started off the year honestly mid-season through Hawkeye, and I was kind of perusing our Instagram just to see where we started in 2022, and we were wrapping up the show, and just from there I think honestly when it comes down to the shows Disney had been putting out for Marvel, I think Hawkeye was a great show to end 2021 with, but also it was a good show to start the year off with, kind of mid-season. So I'm kind of glad that Marvel kind of scheduled that like kind of on the cusp of last year and this year.
And Hawkeye was a really good series, very much like a holiday special almost. Like this is kind of the perfect time if you either haven't watched it to finally get around to watching it or just to rewatch your favorite episodes. Because it definitely lays out that way. In some ways, I think just because it's a combination of like action and a holiday feel, I feel like Die Hard comes to mind just
Sure.
because that's become like a holiday movie. But I do like the timing, and I think that the way that they did it with respect to other projects kind of within that realm, like No Way Home, there were very specific little things and landmarks that I think gave us what I don't really think we've gotten since then, which is some level of continuity and a setup of a timeline, if you will.
Sure.
And I'm speaking specifically to say things like the Statue of Liberty, right? That's like a big one.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that that's something that helped, or it was very well done with the release, and especially because No Way Home was around that same time, kind of sandwiched in the middle. And it was a really great project. I think that it gave us everything we needed to. And yeah, I'm very pleased with that. Yeah.
Just to kind of piggyback off of that, just timeline landmarks, I think honestly this was. I think we mentioned it in the episode when we were wrapping it, when we were talking about it. This is the first show to do kind of like a callback to the movies with Yelena Belova, So we get her and her vendetta in this show, but this still kind of marks a spot in the sacred timeline as far as how it lines up with the events of Black Widow.
And even that, like, if we want to explore it even further, like, this film also tackles um, Yelena's experience with the blip, right? And
Mm-hmm.
I think that that as well makes this something, this show really good because I think it kind of glues these two different sagas together.
Mm-hmm.
It glues different projects within the saga together, and we really haven't gotten much of that sense. And so I think that's something that's really important to highlight with our conversations of Hawkeye. And I think another thing that we really loved with it is that there were a lot of like it paid a homage to a lot of the comics
Mm-hmm.
in a really, really specific way. Like just looking at the introduction, looks super familiar to a run of like Hawkeye's comics, and then also with the way Kingpin's story finishes, it's almost like panel for panel the ending of one of the comics. And so I think those are really great things that you can like appreciate, and it's blended within the story that we've already kind of known to love, you know?
Yeah. And just in talks of the blip, I think Hawkeye was the last official MCU story to reference the blip, because I'm looking at the list right now, and the only other mention of the blip, or not even mention of the blip, but there was an event with the blip, I think was, actually no, I'm mistaken. It has nothing to do. I was gonna bring Morbius up, but that has nothing to do with the blip. That just has to do with the timeline breaking. So we'll get to that later. But as far as blip talk, I think Hawkeye was the official last little thing that, um, with Yelena, as far as blip talk goes, I think that was the last mention of blipful events.
I love that. Blipful events, TM,
Mm-hmm.
trademark
There it
right there
is.
by the CCU. I think you're right. I think this is the last time that we get the conversation of the blip in this way, like where we get a more intimate look of it, of the experience for several different people.
Mm-hmm.
We did get it earlier on with characters like Monica Rambeau and things like that, but this I do believe you're correct that this is the last time we see it in this intimate way. Like we did have it mentioned briefly in say like other projects, like I know Multiverse of Madness briefly mentioned like, oh, loophole of the, oh wait, no, why am I messing that up? That was in No Way Home. Just kidding.
Mm-hmm.
No, I think period. Yeah, the
Yeah.
blippery ends there.
Yeah, the blippery and the blipful events. I gotta write these down.
Yes. Oh
Can you
God.
keep going for us?
Yes. Okay, so I'm trying to think if there's other highlights that I really loved about Hawkeye. Well, of course it gave us, I think, Kate Bishop. We haven't really talked much about her, and this is kind of her introductory into the MCU. She was easily like a very lovable character because, she has very privileged roots. Like she comes from a super, super wealthy family. She has so much skill before we even see her interacting with characters like Hawkeye,
Mm-hmm.
which of course makes her qualified for the role and getting, becoming an Avenger and, what we assume to be like the Young Avengers down the road.
Mm-hmm.
But I think I loved the dynamic that she had with Hawkeye because it was very much that like, you're my friend and we're friends and I'm here to help you. And he's just like, I'm not associated with you. And I
Right.
just feel like the banter back and forth was so perfect. And I think the scene that I love and I talked about a couple of times is the scene where her and why am I like spacing on Hawkeye's real name?
Clint Barton.
Clint Barton. I don't Barton. Anyways,
Mm-hmm.
when they're held captive by Echo, I think this is a moment where she realizes this isn't a game, like this is real, and it's the first time that you see her truly afraid. And I think those are pivotal moments for characters because this is where we see a lot of development.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think this was a really great way to introduce a character like her, and like you mentioned, also kind of pulling in a character that we only just recently met, Yelena Bolova,
Mm-hmm.
and kind of continuing that connection. And so, yeah, there was a lot of juicy things that like Hawkeye was able to give us for sure.
Yeah, and say like I mentioned it before, like Hawkeye was I think the moment that gave gave the name Black Widow uh some fear behind it, because so far, like before we knew Romanoff, and she was already an Avenger, so we didn't really know her as a widow. And then we've already talked about how the Black Widow movie went. To where it was a good movie, but here the stakes were raised to the point to where once Yelena enters the scene, it's like, oh shit, it's a Black Widow, and I don't think we ever got that moment with widows, you know. So we got to establish the seriousness of what a widow was in this series.
Yeah, and I'm so happy that you did mention that because I think, we've associated Black Widow as just Natasha Romanoff, like
Mm-hmm.
for over a decade, that's what we kind of associated. But, we learned in the Black Widow film that that name goes beyond just her, right? It's a whole organization of assassins.
Right.
And now with this project, we got to understand what that means to
Mm-hmm.
people who know what Black Widows are. And I think that was really cool because when we first see Elena Bolova, we don't get the lighthearted, goofy, little sister of Natasha Romanoff. Like
Right.
we get the Black Widow,
Mm-hmm.
and the scene was so iconic when she gets introduced because she is very much handling like Clint and Kate Bishop easily. And I feel like it's just so it was just such a powerful scene. And I
Mm-hmm.
think, following that with Clint realizing this is a Black Widow and being like, okay, Kate, you need to back off because this is serious now. I love that because it does show the skill and their like what they're capable of, you
Yeah,
know?
it's no longer fun and games, you know. Like so far we've been like initially it was just like so far we've just been dealing with, you know, the tracksuit mafia, but that was just like kid stuff in comparison to a widow. Like that's what I got from like how he was just like, all right, there's a widow involved. I'm out and go back to your mom. You know.
Yeah, it was like these are just goons. You can pick them off one by one, easy. And once this threat comes into place, like it's real.
Mm-hmm.
Like Black Widows get things done. Like that's essentially the connotation that we get, and I think that's great because we're going to see her. Speaking to Yelena Belova, we're going to see her again,
Mm-hmm.
and I think that really shows her rank amongst the rest of the street level um, heroes. And actually, just mentioning that super quickly, are you able to pull up our ranking of heroes? I feel like that'd be really cool if we just have on the back end because I'm curious to see where we put Yelena Belova. Like just with all this hype that we're talking about with the Black
I
Widows.
gotta remember that website. That's the thing. Hold on. Let me see if I could find it. But while I'm looking for that, I think uh we're good on Hawkeye. Let's move on to the next thing, which happens to be DC
What's the next one?
Peacemaker.
Peacemaker. Okay. So I think Peacemaker is such an important one to talk about because it is the film, or I'm sorry, the series that starts off 2022 for DC. And this is immediately following pretty much the release of Suicide Squad, which was very much well received and pretty much blew the water, especially compared to the original one. So there was a lot of expectations going to the series, especially because it's going to be directed and written by James Gunn, just like Suicide Squad. We were very, very invested, and we felt like this was going to be a great project, and it was. It gave us so much more of a character that we, for all reasons, should not like, but we do. He's been described as basically a douchebag version of Captain America,
Mm-hmm.
and I think we can agree with that. But there's something that we just love about him, and we get introduced to characters. I'm sorry, not introduced, but we see characters from the Suicide Squad, part of Amanda Waller's team again here. And I think it's one of those films that, I'm sorry, shows that I think what I love so much about it is kind of the development within each character, like their relationship within each
Mm-hmm.
other. Like you get Peacemaker and man, I'm gonna have to pull up the IMDb just so I can remember all of the names.
You have shit. You're yeah. We're gonna have to because it's been a while.
It's been a
It's been a
while.
while.
It's been a while. Okay, so I'm just pulling it up.
And
Let's
after
see.
just side note, after the Peacemaker talk, I did find it, so I brought it back up. But I'm gonna
Okay,
switch back
perfect.
to the original screen, and then we're ready to talk about that ranking. We can bring it back up.
Okay, sounds awesome. So just kind of talking about the relationships we were able to kind of see develop. We have Chris, which is Peacemaker, Leota, Agent Amelia, Adrian Chase, which is like what's his name? I don't have the like his superhero name, but he's like the incompetent like sidekick that just we absolutely love.
Mm-hmm.
Uh we have Clemson. And I mean, I think that all of them, you can look at any of the relationships that they have, and it was like it carried weight, and they all had a different dynamic. And I think that's something that's really cool because it's something that we've mentioned Marvel hasn't really done just yet,
In terms of
and kind of
teams.
building team. Yes, building a team. And I think, we just finished talking about Hawkeye. Like, I think that's the most combination we've really had
Mm-hmm.
in this year. And I think Peacemaker is a great example of seeing how these very different personalities can come together and you care about the relationships within, and it's like it is what it should be, a team.
Yeah, you're talking about. Well, I just found it. Vigilante. Mm-hmm.
Vigilante, yes,
Yep.
crowd favorite.
Mm. Yeah, like say initially I didn't know what to expect from the beginning of the series, but I think just because of how this actor portrayed him and not only made him funny, but I think they made him into like out of the whole group, or I won't say the whole group. Let's just say of the quote unquote vigilantes, um, he became more than what we expected. Meaning, like, I thought he was just going to be just a random sidekick, won't get much action, but he turned out to have his own scene and be able to hold his own like in that scene. So I think of that series, he may have been my favorite character. Like John Cena was cool. I mentioned before, he's kind of growing on me like The Rock did. But of that series, I think it was more so Vigilante for me than the Peacemaker.
Yeah, I totally see what you're saying. I mean, obviously it's like the Peacemaker show, but
Mm-hmm.
I feel like the Vigilante was kind of like the little like it's kind of like what we talked about with Marvel. It's like we get some really amazing sidekicks that we actually really, really, really
Mm-hmm.
love, you know? And I think Vigilante is one of those. And I think what it is when it comes to anti-heroes, this applies for Peacemaker and it applies for Vigilante, is like the redeeming qualities. Because if you remember about Vigilante, like he's kind of a sociopath.
Mm-hmm.
Like the way he talks about people, like he does not value life at all, apart from Peacemaker. But yet we love this character so much, and it's because he has really redeeming qualities, especially the way he cares so much about
Mm-hmm.
Peacemaker. It's sweet, like his loyalty, like those are like the redeeming qualities that I think we really lean on. And I think the same goes for Peacemaker. Like he's an a-hole, but all he really wants is to be loved. He wants, to be part of something, to do good. Like those are the redeeming qualities that I think really shine through and make us really enjoy like these characters. And obviously this is all surrounded with amazing like plot and execution of like the storyline for the series.
Well, then let me ask you, just when it comes down to both Peacemaker and Vigilante, like just because just off of what you said in terms of like sociopath and not really care for, I guess, I don't know, people in general, but I think they do it just because they care. I don't want to like put them in that category. I think Peacemaker is categorized as, for me, as a unwelcome superhero. He was somebody that, let's say, the Justice League or the Justice Society wouldn't uh, consider to be a hero, but hero enough for Amanda Waller to uh, quote unquote initiate for the Suicide Squad. So like people like him and even Vigilante, I think him to be like he everything he does is all for the right reasons, which is he is about taking out the bad guys. It was never really about all lives. It doesn't really matter. He's just like bad guys and the mission. Because I think when it came down to the initial mission of taking out or sniping out the butterflies. A, when he did it for Peacemaker, it was like Peacemaker, he had a weak moment, so A, he was helping out his friend, and then B, he was taking out the butterflies just because it's what the team was mission. Well, that was the mission for the team.
See, it like I feel like when I talk about like the sociopathic behavior, I don't really associate that with Peacemaker. I solely talk about it with Vigilante, and I wish I could remember more of the details, but like I'll just take the one that you kind of talked about. And I think it does show the difference. Like Peacemaker has a conscience and like he has a very, I think, internal sense of like right and wrong. It doesn't always, I think, shine through in a like good
Mm-hmm.
way. But like there are a lot of things that Vigilante does and says that like he's able to take orders because he doesn't have that filter to kind of look through the stop him the same way that Peacemaker has. And I think that's a really good way to kind of compare it. But it's kind of like you said, like he's loyal and he's about the team
Mm-hmm.
and he's about the mission. So he doesn't hesitate. But I think that a lot of it is because he does have like he's on the spectrum of that, like 100%. You know what I mean? Like it's I'm trying to think back to some of the moments because it's almost funny the way it's delivered because it's like, wow, this guy's kind of like messed up, but I also kind of love him.
Mm-hmm.
And you know what I mean? It's just it was a fun dynamic. And I think this show just gave us a lot of that. I think a character that we should definitely talk about is I'm gonna pull her down. I think we know her more as Adebayo throughout the series, and then we kind of learn her first name down the road, I believe. But Adebayo is the one who came in. She's the daughter of Amanda
Mm-hmm.
Waller. She kind of went in to be the eyes and ears for Amanda, and she isn't really qualified for this job,
Mm-hmm.
and that's very plain and clear. Like, there's nothing she contributes to this team, but at the same time, she comes kind of through at the end. You know what I mean? Not in like a full way. I think you and I kept getting frustrated. Like, come on, like just get it together.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that she does kind of keep the team together, Peacemaker, all of that. And I think the same goes with like say Agent Amelia, who's probably like the most sour of them all. Like she's not about the team. She's like, we're not a family. This is all about the mission. But ultimately she comes around. And I know like they have the group chat. Can't remember the name that they put on, but like it's just it's so nice to kind of see this assemble. Like for me, it reminds me a little bit of like the Avengers. You know how like they kind of like bicker and kind of fight a lot in the beginning, but it's not until you know events happen that they actually mold into a team. I think that's very similar to this, obviously just very different,
Mm-hmm.
similar but different.
So I'm not sure whether we graded this show. But let's say on our scale of tiers, where would you put the Peacemaker?
I would put it on that top
S
tier.
tier?
S
Is
tier.
it because of James Gunn? Is it because you're
um
James? I feel like you're James Gunn biased, low key.
No, it's the fact that James Gunn is consistent with projects. Like I think going into this show, I had high expectations because it's made by James Gunn and he's shown that he does well and he has diversity in terms of being able to um direct these stories in his kind of very unique way, but it does make sense for the story that they're telling. So, for example, you see like pieces that you can kind of feel like it's Guardians of the Galaxy esque
Mm-hmm.
when we talk about Suicide Squad, but it's not. You're forcing the Suicide Squad to look like the Guardians of the Galaxy. Like he's still making it true to the stories that he's telling. So going into the Peacemaker, 100%, I felt like he was going to do a great job because he has that track record and it landed. So I think that's a momentum that for me, now that James Gunn is, leading DC, and obviously we'll kind of talk a little bit about this as we wrap up DC, but although there's like a lot of very concerning things happening, I wouldn't even call them concerning. I think they're just like gasp. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Like you see the news, you're like, but I kind of trust the process because I understand the guy behind it. Or I have faith in the guy behind
Mm-hmm.
it because we do have a lot of rapport. So yes, I think that my trust in James Gunn comes from his recent successes.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think with just the show Peacemaker, um, because as far as 2022 is concerned, 2022 was it ended for me. I think it ended in turmoil for DC, but the Peacemaker was a strong start off of the DC fandom in 2021. So we by this point we were thinking DC was going to like rise to the occasion and have a good year. So the Peacemaker was a good stepping stone in the right direction, or good step in the right direction for DC.
I mean, yes, and then obviously with like what we heard in fandom, I think that previous December, right, 2021, there was a huge lineup for 2022. And at
Mm-hmm.
the time, it was actually a bigger lineup than what Marvel had announced
Sure.
at that point. And so we had so much hope for DC. Peacemaker, I mean, was amazing. And then what leads after is Batman. That was amazing. And unfortunately, it kind of crumbled from there. Obviously, there was like a lot of internal changes, a lot of things happening outside that are just very controversial,
Mm-hmm.
like The Flash and Amber Heard, which obviously just changes what they're trying to make. So it's kind of like they have a story, they have a film, and then things happen where they feel like they need to change things because things are so sensitive. And so I mean, they were put in a very challenging position, and obviously films have been pushed back and pushed back and pushed back. And even when we have gotten the releases like Black Adam, for example, things are being cut. And so it's been everywhere for DC for sure. But Peacemaker definitely was a step in the right direction. And I think it still gives us some hope for what we're going to be getting, post James Gunn clean out.
Well, let's say because I want to wrap Peacemaker, but like the next few points are DC that we're gonna get to in a second. But when it comes down to just the top of the year, especially first quarter, the Peacemaker was just like I would say a slam dunk. It was 10 out of 10 S tier, and it gave me high hopes after like because I think even before this point, my hopes are already just over and done with. Even though they gave us the Snyder cut, which was awesome. I was kind of just like DC, they're still trying to figure it out. And then by this point, I think they were, and they gave us some good gems here. But I
Yeah.
think before we move on to the next point, I do want to kind of rewind it back to Marvel just so we can uh, bring up this Yelena conversation real quick. Yelena, I mean.
Yes.
So right now, as far as street level, we have two rows of street levels, and she's on the bottom row. Do you want me to name from the beginning to where she is?
You know what? Let's just keep it relative to Hawkeye because I think Hawkeye is very cool for this conversation since it had so many street level
Mm-hmm.
characters. So is Kate Bishop on that list already? I
Yes.
can't remember. Okay, so we got Kate Bishop,
Mm-hmm.
Hawkeye, and Yelena Belova. Let's just kind of see. I'm curious to see where we ranked those three and who's above who.
Coincidentally, all like I have four characters from that show, and they're all right next to each other. They're not spaced out. So from Hawkeye, it goes Yelena Belova as the first, then Hawkeye, then Kate Bishop, and then Echo.
Okay, okay. I mean, I stand by that, and that's why I was curious because obviously we were having such a discussion over the Black Widows and just Yelena's capability and just like the fear that it like kind of hit in Barton when he found out that this is a Black Widow.
Mm-hmm.
I was very curious to see where we ranked it, so I think I stand by that
Yeah.
ranking.
But now that we're here, because we made a ranking, and now that I wonder if I can move it. Can I move certain people? Okay, so uh, Black Panther: Wakanda Forever came out, and looking at the street level people, Riri Williams is on this list, and we haven't really talked about her after seeing the movie in terms of where she ranks. Do you want to have that discussion right now?
Yes, please remind me the category. So let's pick her category and then we can kind of put it in there because I'm not too sure what categories we have. Would she be street
She is in the
level? Is
street
that where
level,
we put?
yes.
Okay, perfect. So yeah. So let's see. I think a good place to start is looking at, say, where Rhodey is and characters similar to him, like even like the Falcon or like the new Captain America, just
Mm-hmm.
because they have a similar um they're similar in that their enhancement is their
Sure.
technology,
Mm-hmm.
along with skill.
Mm-hmm.
So where are those looking and kind of
So,
what does that lineup look?
say in terms of tech here, because I think I want to start with there's Ant Man and the Wasp, then there's Captain America, then there's Rhodey, then there's Bucky, and then there's Ironheart. Like all of these coincidentally are technologically advanced heroes here. So like that's the order that we have in the ranking.
Okay. Okay. And I think we put Riri there just because obviously we didn't have much to go off of.
Correct.
And I think we based it same thing that their powers are very similar. It's about well technology based.
Right.
So okay, ready? This is kind of bold.
Okay.
I kind of want to put her above all of those.
Ooh, why?
Like, and the reason is because of this. So her technology is of the level of Iron Man,
Is
right?
it?
She lacks, I think, well, very much so, and I think it's one of the most comparable ones. And I think what she does lack is, I think, experience. She's very green
Mm-hmm.
as a hero, right? But the potential that she has, I think, is very big because she's the one who makes these herself. Like she has so much ability that the people of Talokan like wanted to take her out. Like I think that there is a debate to kind of put her at the front because of potential. So obviously there's debate there because we haven't seen much beyond Black
Mm-hmm.
Panther, but being that we saw what she can do, her tech is very similar to Iron Man's tech. She is of the same level in terms of intelligence. They're alumni of the same school. And if Iron Man was on this list, I'm pretty damn sure we would rank him above the ones we just
Mm-hmm.
mentioned. I kind of want to put her on the top of that little section.
Man, all right. So of this section, right? Um, I wouldn't put her against. I mean, above Ant Man and the Wasp right now, just because.
Oh, you know what? I forgot about them. Yeah, I will yield to it because that has a little bit of a different component in my mind. Yeah.
Right. So say Ant Man and the Wasp aside, we have Falcon, aka Captain America, Rhodey, Bucky. I would put her above Bucky just for the fact that her technology would be a little bit more advanced than his one arm. But say her tech that we got at the end of Wakanda Forever is it's not hers, it's Wakandan. Like I don't want to put that I would say her suit that we got was more of Shuri's suit than hers.
Shuri didn't make it though. That was all her. Yes, she's using the technology of Wakanda, but I think it's similar to like Iron Man using the resources that he has with Stark Industries. Obviously, Wakanda's like resources are much greater, and honestly, I feel like that fuels the point that she could potentially be higher ranked than the Falcon slash Captain America. So like I'm very like firm on my feelings, but of course this is all potential.
Sure.
You know what I mean?
Sure.
She is very green, and that's why I think if say we were to leave her just maybe one step above Bucky, that might be a safer placement right now because obviously this is all potential. We haven't seen this just yet. But I feel like she ranks just I really do feel like she ranks above
All
Falcon.
right. So I put her above Bucky. I think the last question that I have, um, not really related to her, but when it comes down to Rhodey, right? Um, his latest suit that he got or had in Endgame, was it enhanced by Rocket?
Ah, that's a really good question. I do not know, but I would definitely see it being enhanced by Rocket for sure.
So that's the only one up I would feel like his suit would have because it's a combination of Tony and Rocket's tech. You know what I'm saying? And we don't know. I mean, we know how smart he is, how smart Rocket is, but who knows? He could have improved something that Tony didn't know because we already had that kind of chit chat with them building the gauntlet, you know. And he's like, "You're not the only genius in the universe," or something like that, you know. So, I think if we want to rank it, I would put Rhodey above Sam. But now I think the conversation would be between Sam and Ironheart, and you're saying her above Sam.
So, yes, and I do stand by, I think she has the potential to outrank even Rhodey. However, I think based on the conversation we're having, maybe it should make more sense for us to just go off of what we have seen.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like, because you're totally right. Like, I think if Rhodey's technology is blended with that of like rockets being that, we know Rocket, he can build anything out of
Mm-hmm.
anything, then that does, add a little bit more to the conversation, but we don't know yet. And I think so maybe once we get more information, we kind of reassess it. So I think for now, I can yield to just having her above Bucky, and then we can kind of revisit the whole Falcon
Oh, so right now just
and
her
Rhodey.
above Bucky.
Yes, let's do that for now.
Okay.
Let's be conservative
All
for
right.
now. And then once we get more, I think we can reassess.
So, last question before moving back into DC. Do you think she is going to make a cameo in Armor Wars?
I feel like it would make sense that she would. I really do. Especially because so she's on the radar of Wakanda, of course,
Mm-hmm.
on the radar of I was gonna say the Atlanteans, the people of Talokan, and she's also on the radar of like the CIA
Sure.
now. You know what I mean? Like, and so I feel like it would make a lot of sense for Rhodey to be aware of her as well as like uh
General Ross or
Captain
something like that?
America.
Or, okay.
Yeah, that as well. That as well. And so I do see her coming into Armor Wars. Um, I don't really know like the full plot of Armor Wars
Sure.
to say, but maybe she would make a cameo. I feel like that would be really cool because I think she does fall under that arena
Yeah, I
of
think
like
she
heroes.
has like a foot in the door just in terms of armors. And if there's like a war right now, I think the only conversation we're thinking about, I mean, only people in the conversation that we're thinking about in terms of armor right now is Rhodey, her, and then the honorable mention of Justin Hammer, which we don't know for sure if he's going to be in it. It's only been a rumor, but in the MCU, he's the only one to really create well, not necessarily a suit because initially the Russian guy made the suit for himself and he ended up getting drones. But I think he would be in that conversation of Armor Wars too.
Yeah, sure. Completely agree.
All right. So moving back into 2022, we recapped Peacemaker, and DC kept the ball rolling with the Batman, and we can't praise this movie enough. Again, this is another gem to where DC was making all the right moves. It was like their shining moment this part of the year, and the Batman was awesome.
See, I think with this Peacemaker and Suicide Squad, obviously Peacemaker left us to kind of start to connect different movies together
Mm-hmm.
at that point and kind of find some continuity within DC that later obviously changed and everything like that.
Right.
But I feel like viewing a lot of these films as one-offs, I think has made the most sense for me when it comes to DC since continuity has been
Mm-hmm.
everywhere. And it for me, it's kind of like if they're connected, just tell me they're connected. If they're not, they're not, or
Mm-hmm.
if they don't mention it, I'm just gonna assume it's separate. But the Batman, I think, is just such a great standalone project.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel honestly, it's like you said, we can't praise this film enough. It
Right.
was just so perfect. And I think it's so true to DC to find that these little one-offs are actually hitting so well because a lot of the one-off storylines in the comics are some of the most popular, you know?
Mm, I didn't know that.
Um, yeah, and so it's I think this film is amazing. I can't wait for the sequel because I know they pretty much confirmed it while I'm
Yeah,
hitting
like
the
what
call.
is going
Uh Sorry.
on?
They pretty much confirmed it, after almost like during like the release of the film, and so I'm excited to see. I think this was such a initial film, great initial film because we got to meet the Batman and we got to meet Selena Kyle, but we haven't met their alter egos, and I think that's what we're going to be able to explore in the next film, and I think that's really exciting.
I actually liked how you put that. They're meeting their alter egos. So initially, you're saying, well, I can't even say initially because just thinking back in the history of Batman, Bruce Wayne was the quote unquote alter ego because no matter what, he's just a scarred, damaged vigilante at heart. And then just putting on the front of Bruce Wayne it was more so the front. And I think honestly we kind of got that at the end of Batman Begins, like, cuz I forgot the girl's name, but like his girl kind of mentioned it, just like, nah, you came back somebody different, you're no longer Bruce, and that's pretty much uh who Batman is as a whole.
And I think when it comes to this film, The Batman, we see Batman like 95%
Mm-hmm.
of the time. And the 5% that we have Bruce Wayne in, it's very much the
Mm-hmm.
mask because he only uses Bruce Wayne to infiltrate spaces that the Batman
Mm-hmm.
couldn't or he wouldn't be privy to, you know? And I feel like that's such a great display of a theory that a lot of people have that like it's actually Bruce Bruce Wayne is the alter ego and his main like personality is Batman. I think I feel like it was so interesting that they played with that in this film. And I think it is part of his healing process to start to actually have more of an identity as Bruce Wayne because the Batman is a coping mechanism
Mm-hmm.
for him, and I think it's a big part of, the line like I am vengeance, and I think at the end I forget what he changes it to, but I think it's such a symbol of his growth in this film. And I think it was Alfred that he's like, come on, like you can't just be brooding all day long. You have to have a life outside of this. And so I'm excited for the next film because I really feel like we're going to get more Bruce Wayne and obviously we're going to get the Catwoman. And I'm really excited to get that introduction because we've only really met Selena
Mm-hmm.
Kyle. Like this is very early on in both of their careers.
With that being said, you've heard for sure confirmation on a sequel to that?
I'm very certain that this was something that was announced very shortly after the film's release, and I'm just going to check it and just make sure because I'm in front of my
That's
laptop
awesome.
today, so I
Awesome,
can.
awesome.
All right, let's see. Okay. Yes, so it is confirmed that there will be a second film. I don't know. It seems like there's a little bit more detail around it as well, but I'm not going to read
Mm-hmm.
it. All of it, but I'm trying to see. Okay. So, okay, here we go. So, while an official release date is yet to be announced, reports have suggested the sequel will not land in cinema until 2025 at the earliest. So, confirmed that this is a project that they will be working on, but it doesn't seem like we're going to get it
Sure.
anytime soon.
Well,
Yeah.
that's fine. They still need time to figure it out. And I don't want to rush. Like, say a movie like The Batman, it felt like a movie that wasn't rushed, in comparison to the DCEU films, to where they were trying to rush everything, and we can obviously see that. So take all the time you need to give us, again, more quality over quantity.
Oh, absolutely. And something I'm just realizing that I did not remember is this is a 2 hour and 56-minute
Mm-hmm.
film. That's incredible. And I think it's just that like they took their time with it. The script is excellent. The casting was excellent. It's the first time that we really get to see Batman as the best detective
Mm-hmm.
ever, which is what
Mm-hmm.
he is. And that's not something that we've really been able to get to this level. It's very grounded, it's gritty, it's moody, it's dark, it's, gothic. It's just everything we needed, and I can't wait for the next one.
And I think if anything, we needed a better Batman v Riddler storyline, and because I think initially in the original we already gotten the two Tim Burton Michael Keaton movies, but then after those two it moved over to uh, Joel Schumacher and Val Kilmer, and they gave us Jim Carrey. And at the time, Jim Carrey was at his peak, and at my age, I loved anything Jim Carrey. But watching it today, I was just like, I don't know. Like, I don't know how they got away with this. You know what I'm saying? Back in the day. So, this movie, The Batman, was definitely a good or a better, and I don't want to say like I'm thinking of the word attempt. It's not an attempt. It was a good, yeah,
Adaptation.
adaptation of Batman versus the Riddler. Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. And I think it's so like it's like we said, it's very grounded because you get the Riddler and it's very true to the Riddler. Like it's very recognizable, but I don't think I've ever been as scared of the Riddler as I was in this
Mm-hmm.
film. Like it's truly scary. Like I think the first um scene in this film is on Halloween night, and you have, I forget who, I think he's some form of a politician. I don't know if
Right.
he was the
Right.
mayor, can't
Mm-hmm.
remember his like status, but something like that. And he's watching the news, and they just do such a sophisticated like this, they did such a great job of building suspense in such a like sophisticated fashion because you can see the
Mm-hmm.
Riddler in the back, and you would think that that gives it away, but it actually creates the suspense because that the threat is right there, and the other person doesn't, and so it's very much like a ticking
Sure.
time bomb. And once it strikes, like it's gruesome, and then especially afterwards when you kind of see like the wrapping around his face and the writing, like it's just so gritty. I love it.
Definitely. So, just moving on. Batman again. S tier. But DC kept it rolling because after the Batman, they actually gave us a series on HBO called DMZ, and I think it was honestly maybe only 4 episodes, and I was kind of saddened that it was only 4. But no matter what, each episode, all 4 were good, just for the simple fact that we were taken away from superheroes here. This was more so a little bit more realistic, just in case of, like in the case of, I'm guessing it's more so a political government situation to where the country was divided, and then there's one area of the country called the demilitarized zone, and in there it was a lot of stuff going on to where either you couldn't enter, or if you were caught entering or exiting, you were just executed on site. So with that premise in mind, I had no idea how the show was going to be, but it actually turned out to be better than expected.
See, I feel like this show kind of revisits that generation of films that was so popular, like the Games and the Maze Runner, where it's like a post-apocalyptic type thing, like post-war
Mm-hmm.
era that creates a completely new dynamic. So, kind of entering into the series, you really need to pay attention to the parameters and how like the world works in this structure. And I think that's
Yeah,
really cool. It's very much what we did with other projects, like I said, Hunger Games, Maze Runner. And then the story you get like is very good. I think if I'm remembering correctly, my final thoughts is like I think it was just a little rushed. Like I feel like every single episode could have been its own season very easily. And I think that the story that they did was fine. And I really liked it. Like something that we don't always get is feeling content by the end of it. And I really felt that contentment because we have what's her name?
Rosario.
Rosario
Mm-hmm.
Dawson's character basically becoming the president of like
Mm-hmm.
DMZ, and her son and his like
Mm-hmm.
girlfriend get to have this like Romeo Juliet like happy. like Romeo and Juliet, but with a
Sure.
happy ending,
Yeah.
you know? And so I think I was really happy with how it ended and where the things, all the, like the pieces kind of fell. I just do think that in the end it was rushed, and I think it, like honestly, each episode could have been a season. I think that would have been
Well,
so cool.
say just for content's sake, of the 4 episodes, I think if let's say initially when if the execs are talking about putting out the show and they only decide to do the 4 episodes or whatnot, yeah, it would have to be rushed. But I think just to get a general idea of what the DMZ is, I think we got that, and they gave us the point that they were trying to make. Yes, it's not necessarily a story about Rosario. It's a story about uh, uh, a zone that is, if anything, pretty much chaotic, and it's like in the zone, it's just like broken down into different factions to the point to where, even though it didn't go, actually no, it did go into a little war between two factions, so it was a demonstration of, I think, if, like, I don't want to say it's realistic, but it's the closest thing to where if something went down in real life, like, this is the possibility of what could happen, being that there's no superheroes involved, I mean.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's like, and I think the character that's a great example of kind of that dynamic. Let me just pull up his name, Wilson
Mm-hmm.
Lin. This is the character who was like always in love with Alma
Mm-hmm.
Ortega, which is Rosario Dawson's
Mm-hmm.
character. And when we first meet him, we kind of get, I think, a sensation of who he was before these events. You know, very um, like soft. There, nothing really dominating
Right.
about him. But when all of this happened and everything was in shambles, he kind of took this as an opportunity to become a leader and build a following and build a section of the community. And I think that his story is a great example of how he transformed and became, very like, I don't even violent. I'm just going to use
Mm-hmm.
that word, because obviously like this is how he runs his sector, and like merciless really. And so I think that in with the comment that you made that this is very realistic, and I think that's kind of a this is a great character to kind of analyze when it comes
Mm-hmm.
to that.
Yeah, definitely. From going to, because I think he was maybe like a nurse before, to the head of, like, I think he was the head of like the Chinese mafia or something like that. It's just like, I think it was just like only a matter of a few years, but like even in that, I think something like that could happen. Somebody could rise to power, but in order to rise to power, they would have to do the things that he did that we saw in the episode, and that is having to go dark. Like initially when we first met him, he was like a cool guy. You know what I'm saying? And then later on, when it came down, I think to the point to where he found out there was like a leak in his organization, he had to show what he's done to become as powerful as he was.
Yeah, and I think it's very similar to, just we just talked about Batman, the Penguin. Like Gotham is destabilized after the events of, with the Riddler and everything, and he kind of with how this film ends and with the comments we've had with like directors, etc. He's going to take this as an opportunity to really bring himself
Sure,
above the rankings,
definitely.
And I think that's another great example of this. Like, everything was destabilized and it gave an opportunity for individuals to rise up. And that's kind of how we saw these different
Mm-hmm.
factions be
Definitely.
created.
So let's say moving on from that, because as of right now, we're gonna take a break from DC. I think we're reaching, honestly, Marvel's peak of 2022, which for me was Moon Knight. I think Moon Knight was maybe the last S tier or even A tier of Marvel Studios for 2022. Is that a hot take or not?
I think that's an easy thing for me to agree upon because I think what follows afterwards is Multiverse of Madness,
Mm-hmm.
if I'm not mistaken. Yep. So yep, I 1,000% agree. So I'm gonna let you kind of start off
Sure.
with this one. I need to like respond to the person who
I
just
got you.
kept
Sure, sure,
calling me.
sure.
So
I
I'm
got
just
you.
gonna hop off camera
So
real quick.
say
Yep.
when it comes down to Moon Knight, Moon Knight was a part or a series that Marvel Studios, they were tapping into the horror verse. I'm just going to hold on, take off this Skype situation real quick. But yeah, say it was their first attempt in venturing off into the horror genre, and from there, they hit it right on the nail, on the mark, on the dot. They did everything right when it came down to this show. It was like just a matter of a introducing a brand new character that we have never met, and then B, if we're gonna tap into this horror genre, we're gonna tap in at the very first episode, and that's what they did. They gave us like all like from the jump the spookiness and everything, and then from there they also gave us the mystery of the Moon Knight, because even at the beginning we didn't know who this was, and we didn't know what was going on with this character, because there was something obviously going on since the beginning where um, sheesh, I forgot the main character's name. I just want to call him Moon Knight, but he he of course we heard voices, and there were moments to where he would black out and wake up in different areas or whatnot. But it was that mystery of these voices and just the darkness that we kept seeing, especially in the bathroom scene of the first episode. um like Marvel started it off right with giving us their first take on horror, which wasn't necessarily like superhero. It was more so just like, all right, we're gonna bring y'all the scary, and I think they did that with the Moon Knight.
Absolutely. I'm back
Yeah.
on. Can you hear?
Yep.
Can you see
Yep.
me?
We're good.
Perfect. So I want to touch upon a lot of the things that you mentioned. So I think this definitely was a project that kind of segued Marvel into a different genre, playing with a little bit more suspense, playing with a little bit more of darker themes. And I think they did such a great job. Like, this was very much like a psychological thriller in many ways, because there's no definitive interpretation of the events towards the end. You kind of have to almost theorize on your own and speculate, because it's not like verbatimly explained. And I think that's something that's really fun, because I think it's room for a lot of discussion. And it's there's room for a lot of answers to or a lot of questions to be answered in following
Mm-hmm.
series, and just to kind of give people a reminder of the name. So we have Mark Spector, who is the base
Correct.
personality, right? So this is the individual who we didn't meet until maybe episode
Mm-hmm.
2 or 3, because he has been suppressed. He's been suppressed for a while. But Mark Spector experienced a lot of trauma at the hands of his mother, and his way of coping was creating these different personalities. So one of them being Stephen Grant. And Stephen Grant, this personality was essentially a way for him to believe that he has this loving mother, a beautiful childhood without this kind of trauma. And he's just such a sweetheart. Like, we fall in love with him very, very easily at the start, just because he's so genuine. He's so soft spoken, but you can tell that he's struggling with
Mm-hmm.
something, and he has a really hard time with it. And we see that in episode 1. He's going into work, people are saying things that he's like, I have no recollection of, and things like that. And so these are the main personalities that we kind of play with throughout the duration of this series. And a lot of it is the conflicts that these two personalities have. And it's a beautiful story, because in the end, the way that they're able to fight the villain and succeed is by harmonizing with these two different personalities and accepting that this is who
Right.
they are. And it's not just the hard parts. Like, there was a lot of benefits to this, like, mental disorder that not everyone understands or can highlight. And I think that's a really great theme that we don't always see from superhero films, because it's not really a topic we get like that.
And Oscar Isaac shined with switching accents, just like nothing, going from English to New York, even going to Spanish at the very end, you know. So even though he is Hispanic, you know, at the end of the day, he is playing three characters and maybe even more in the future. And I'm now like after watching this, it's like yeah, it led us to some questions, but it also wanted or led me to want more, like and specifically want more from Oscar Isaac just because he killed it. Like if we're talking actors in the MCU, I think if anything he's top tier and he deserves more time in the MCU, you know, just because of his caliber of acting.
I mean, it is amazing. Like, I think it is so impressive how you will see one shot and he is transitioning from one person to the other seamlessly. And the thing is, it's not just accent, it's the mannerisms and the tone of the voice is so
Mm-hmm.
different. And for him to do that like in a split of a second, like it's just incredible. And I agree, like I just want to see more of him. And just because you did briefly mention it, so like we said, the two main personalities we got to play with in Moon Knight were Mark Spector and
Mm-hmm.
Stephen Grant. But the one that we met at the very end, his name is Jake Lockley, and this personality that a lot of people suspect is the one that took the beatings from his mother,
Mm.
because we know that the mom was physically abusive. We know that Mark created these different personalities to help cope with these difficult times. Stephen Grant was the one to kind of help him feel like he actually has a good childhood. However, the personality that took the brutality of it, a lot of people suspect, is Jake Lockley. And from what we saw at the very end of the series, he is the more brutal character. You know, like he isn't as much of a good guy as we feel like with the other two
Sure, because I
personalities.
think there were only two blackouts that were unaccounted for from Mark and Steven to where they had no idea what happened, and those blackouts just happened to be just brutal for whoever was surrounding him. And I think one was where Mark was chasing down some people in Egypt, and then somehow he wakes up to the people dead. And then at the very end, where it's Mark versus, or Mark and Steven versus Ethan Hawke, and then there's a moment to where Ethan Hawke is about to overpower them, but then they both black out, and it's easy to assume that that was Jake that took over then.
Yes, absolutely. And so I feel like there's just so many things to talk about when it comes to this. And one we haven't talked about is Khonshu. So Khonshu is like the Egyptian god that basically possesses and holds Mark Spector and uses him kind of as a pawn for a lot of the things that are
Mm-hmm.
going on. So Khonshu isn't exactly a good guy, but he's also not like fully a bad guy. He kind of walks the fine line. Definitely by the end of the series, I think we can categorize him a little bit more on the bad side just because he's secretly still using Mark Spector's personalities for his own
Mm-hmm.
agenda. But there are snippets through the series where you can see like a genuine friendship and relationship that Khonshu has with both Mark Spector and Stephen Grant. Those little brief glimpses, and I'm wondering because it does seem like Khonshu's gonna be like the main antagonist almost in the next series, just the way that it
Mm-hmm.
finished out. I'm wondering if we're going to see them have some resolution since Moon Knight and his story and his the way we continue to see him as a character is very much alongside with Khonshu,
Right.
you know?
Conchu pretty much molded his own like Batman, basically. And the only reason why I say that is because I think their missions were the same to where vengeance was the mission. And I think in this season was more so Moon Knight versus or Khonshu versus the god that wasn't necessarily vengeance, but it was to the god who prevents the bad from ever happening. And I think there was the question of which god was actually better, and it's just like in the events that took place, Kanchu won, but as far as the conversation, I don't think there was a winner as far as who was better than who.
In terms of like who better than who, what are you referring to specifically?
Uh, Vengeance versus prevention.
Oh, okay, okay, okay. I understood. Understood. Yeah, I mean, I feel like this like series like, tackles so many topics, adventures into so many different realms. And honestly, like this film also set a precedent for some things that we really didn't have outlined, like the afterlife and having those conversations of, what does that look like for different people and different religions and different just kind of belief systems. And I think that this was really cool because, of course, we were waiting for Black Panther to also kind of help us stitch in those little
Mm-hmm.
pieces. But yeah, I feel like this tackled so much. And something I did love is that they did say that like we're going to be seeing this character in a little bit more of a bubble. And we won't see him interact with other main characters for some
Mm-hmm.
time, which I like, just because I feel like there's so much to do with this character alone, that I'm okay with him having kind of a solo moment. And I am excited though for him to start to have other relationships with different heroes, just because I'm very intrigued to see how that would go, especially switching back from Mark to
Mm-hmm.
Steven. And so I'm excited for that to come, but I'm definitely not in a rush for it.
And as of right now, I think if anything, it can technically be a standalone just for the fact that I don't think there were any mentions of anything Avenger-esque at all. Not even like a poster or a T-shirt or anything like that. So this show was fully Moon Knight all the way with no mention of any other characters. So even if it's on a branch in an alternate universe, that's fine. We can keep it there, and then if they can build upon that, great. I'm still for it.
I'm trying to actually see. Yeah, you're right. There are no references to any of said characters or events that have happened in the MCU
Mm-hmm.
projects. Yeah, that's correct. And just kind of seeing this actually, apparently, Moon Knight was supposed to have some references to Thor: Love and Thunder, but eventually, in the end, they did kind of scratch that, and I think specifically to Gore, the
Mm-hmm.
God Butcher. But yeah, in the end, in the final cut, we don't get any of those links, and like I said, I'm okay with that. I think that this is one of those series that I definitely didn't expect there to be a link, nor did I feel like it was missing one. Where other projects, I feel like there was opportunity to kind of link some things where they didn't. Um, so yeah, I think this is the last of the S tier projects from Marvel, unless I'm
No,
forgetting one.
but I think if anything,
I
I
love
was
the
like
black.
no,
No, no.
but I think when it comes down to it, I think it would have made sense to me if we saw Khonshu and any other of the Egyptian gods in the little hall of gods in Thor: Love and Thunder. But being that we didn't, I think it's just easier for us to assume that, well, not even assume, or maybe assume that this may be in another universe, low key.
Could be. We
Mm-hmm.
don't know. I would love to kind of see it in the main
Mm-hmm.
universe. I just think that would be great. But we don't know yet. So honestly, that could very well be the case. Another thing is, I think that what they could do, and I think I'd be very happy with, is if they kind of like what you mentioned. So not so much Moon Knight making references to the MCU, but the MCU making references to
Mm-hmm.
Moon Knight, even if it's just through Khonshu, or even like the way about one of the cities that was also talked about in Shang-Chi.
Uh,
Not Shang-Chi, I think the Falcon and the Winter Soldier. Like it wasn't not mentioned about the power broker.
I
Not the power broker, but like this the place that the power broker kind of resides
I have
in.
no idea. I don't remember.
I'm like so convinced this happened. We will revisit this, but I kind of want to say that she was trying to see Madripoor.